an old insurance building that had sat vacant for almost 15 years. The back there? See what happens when you dim lights.
No. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Image show. Image show.
Thank you. Okay. Columbus encouraged us to renovate that building because it was a very nice building, Columbus, Ohio, and it had most of the fine features that we were looking for in a law school. But we didn't have a chance to really plan for it as well as we thought, because in August of '97 we started our move to this building here. And the biggest reason we started was because our building was being leveled. Also an insurance company, the insurance company we were leasing a building from, we had another year left on our lease, and they had run out of parking space. And they were giving us very strong incentives to leave. So we took those financial incentives, added it to our building renovation, and apologized to our first-year class coming in about the construction that was going to continue during that first semester. There was just no way around it. They had been working on it for a year and a half, but we went in early knowing we'd see a lot of hard hats in the building for that first semester. One of the things I would have done differently had we all to do it over again, although this wasn't really in my hands, was the first PC technician, networker, audiovisual person was myself, and I wasn't hired until June '97. We were moving in August of '97. So there was very little thought given to some of those features of the building. Main campus was giving the most input on that, and they had reasons that I'm not sure about why some things were left out. The construction did run it over into the first semester of the building. We just had to prioritize what had to come up first. Obviously, admissions and some of our nuts and bolts departments had to come up with at least data jacks that worked and phone closets with phones that worked. The classrooms had to be sittable, but that was about all we had in there. All our audio-visual, there was no fixed AV when we first went in the building. I went to the hardware store, bought carts, and put them together one night, and went out to the local computer store, bought some laptops, and put together AV carts that were pulled into the rooms as the professor asked for it. Now, one of the benefits of the building was we didn't completely have to gut it. It was an insurance company, and they had some very nice original cherry work that had been there since the 1940s. It was beautiful. None of that had to be redone. That's just a view of one of our lobbies and the school at night. So there were some good reasons. We had an old phone closet. They updated the phone circuitry. And we got a phone slave that ran to our main campus and we helped them purchase a new phone system, so we were all on the same phone exchange. We could do all this because we were in a new, we purchased this building, we knew it was permanent, so we could actually do these hard wiring kind of things that we'd never been able to do when we leased. Some shots of the new technology. That was one of our little data closets. You can see in the upper left-hand corner there, they did have the forethought to run fiber, which is really nice. It gives us more options for the future. We didn't have any hubs that use the fiber, but we do at least have the fiber run in the building, so there is more potential for the future there. And this is our main phone data closet with the router. The T1 lines run through here. And if you can notice, that's a basement they put all that into, and there are water pipes running up above all of that. This is one of the things that if they had had some technology who was focused strictly on the school, we might have found a better place for this kind of high-end stuff. The second phase was getting our first servers in '98. We'd been here for a full semester. We had no email. We had no website. We had no way to share files. Main campus kept saying we could do it without servers. We just obviously didn't know how. There's a shot of After one semester, we gave them an entire semester to show us how, and when that didn't happen, our faculty got involved because they had been pushing this new technology that was going to happen in the building, and having faculty allies and having a computer technology committee full of faculty is the only way to push, in my opinion, the big things you need that cost a lot of money. They're going to be a major investment for the school. If you get the faculty behind you, it usually happens. So our first servers came up in January of '98. That blue closet that has all the different hard drives in it, that was our first set of servers. It ran file storage, email, and web from there. And I'll show you a little bit about the room we had to put that server in. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a wire on that door. And the reason is it only locks from one way, and that's from inside. And so we would constantly be locked into this room. So the security wasn't really great. And the reason for that is this room was the only room that was left vacant. It was in the library, so the librarians didn't want you to be able to just go right on out the server room. And my PC techs have been ingenious enough to wire the doors so that it won't shut now. Great for them to get out of the room, but it's not exactly the security I would prefer. And this is another shot of the room. Notice the yellow tile. We gutted a bathroom to make this room. Once we had our network up and running, the next thing we focused on was our audiovisual. This really did come in 3 phases for the law school. And they knew it was going to come in 3 phases. This was no surprise to anybody. If we had to move into the building quickly, we had to develop things as we went along. The first problem we had was main campus had been working with the architects before we went into the building, and they had shown them where the outlets and where the network jacks and everything was going to be for this equipment. But they hadn't decided what equipment we were going to use. And if you've worked with audiovisual, you know that different brands will start the screen from the top and go down or center it. Different ones need to be 20 feet back or 30 feet back. It all depends on what you buy. And of course, what they had chosen for us didn't even exist anymore by the time we got around to buying the equipment. So we had to pull out ceiling tiles and move things back, and it was almost more work to fix what had been put in there in the beginning for us than it was to have started over. The other problem we had, which was a little frustrating, because we had just built these classrooms less than a year ago, and some of the rooms didn't have drop ceilings, or they didn't have tiles that you could get to from under the floor. They were pure concrete on both ends. And so we literally had to get jackhammers in and make data trenches for some of our cabling to go to the podiums. It was a little hard to explain to the dean why we needed to tear up the brand new floor. And the other thing, I had just got the faculty to work with the AV carts. They were getting a little bit of skill, a little bit of familiarity with those, and then we changed over to the fixed AV less than a year later. Well, not every room, but we started with the big rooms. And it was very frustrating to the faculty to have to be constantly relearning how to do something that they saw as only a tool to getting the actual instruction to the student. They didn't see it as the main focus of what they were doing, which I certainly understand that. They also didn't give us the podiums, so we had to have the podiums built. And that was done fall of '98. And the right-hand side we built for the PC, and the left-hand side we built for the audiovisual, because we didn't have any closets in any of the rooms to hide our AV, so everything we had to go inside the podiums. What I would have done differently if I had this to do over, the front of it slants and has a glass inside, and that's where we mounted the monitors. It's very hard to see those monitors with the bright lights, the fluorescent lights in those rooms. These here that stand up over the podiums are much nicer. I think I would have changed that too. Making it work for the faculty. In some rooms that were very complex, that had cameras to tape the rooms, to do video feed into other rooms, had VCRs for recording, VCRs for playing, had DVD, had the computer and the laptop image. We've got 3 rooms now with the Crestron units, which is very much like the Panja units. I think Panja is AMX now. Those rooms are run by a control panel that controls all the equipment in it, and those rooms are much easier to use. Philips Pronto also made, let me get rid of this. Philips Pronto also made this little handheld unit. Its limitations are it's IR, not RF, so you have to be within a physical range. You have to be pointing at the equipment. It won't just go out into the air and find the equipment. But it's programmable, and the files you program on the little Philips Pronto, you can download to your laptop. So if somebody decides to go in at night and change the unit, you can just load the file back on it, which is really nice. We have 10 of those in the building right now, and those have helped a lot in some of the smaller rooms. The other side plus to that is those cost $230, I think. They're running about now. And the Crestron units, I think the last one we purchased with the programming, the extra cabling, the unit itself was about $5,500. So, yeah.
What is the difference between IR and RF?
IR, if you use your remote control at home with your TV, it's IR, it's infrared remote. And it literally is a light beam that points the program to the unit, and it has an IR receiver that you have to physically be pointing at. RF is radio frequency, which means it goes into the airwaves at a certain frequency tuning. So all you need to do is have it tuning into a certain frequency. When you hit the button, it can be 30 feet away, it can be behind a door, it doesn't matter. The RF will work. In a couple of the small rooms, we still use the remotes, but we don't assume anything with the remotes anymore. We have them all labeled. This is for the projector, this is for the VCR. Even though the name brands on them usually reflect what they are, I know that when you're in the middle of a class, you don't have time to stare at the screen and find the brand name, so we have all those labeled down. That's it for mine. Maybe Peter would like to talk about his experiences.
Okay, our law school at the University of Melbourne had a wonderful opportunity several years ago to move into a new building. That opportunity was taken up, and we're currently well into construction. Let me give you some background on the University of Melbourne. We have a city campus located in red, as you can see on top of the screen, very close to the Melbourne Central Business District in pink. Melbourne is the second largest city in Australia. We like to think of ourselves as the sporting capital of Australia, despite Sydney getting the Olympics, but they did it 50 years after we had it in 56. We like to think of ourselves as the cultural capital of Australia, and also perhaps the educational capital. If you draw a 2-mile radius circle around Melbourne CBD, you'll circle at least 3 major universities. Melbourne University is one of the biggest universities in Australia. We've got over 40,000 students. The law school specifically has over 2,600 students, which is probably quite big by American standards. We teach LLB, Bachelor of Law, undergraduate degrees to students for admission to practice. We have about 1,800 of them. We have 800 students enrolled in graduate diplomas, masters, PhDs, JDs. We have a full-time academic faculty staff of 75. In terms of adjuncts, it's probably double that. We have around about 40 administrative staff. Melbourne University is one of the oldest universities in Australia, and the law school is the oldest faculty, or one of the oldest faculties in the university, and we live in some of the oldest buildings in the university. We currently operate out of 3 buildings, 2 of which date to 1850, and a third one we've moved into recently out of some old terrace houses, which dates to the 1970s. The older buildings are lovely from the outside, fabulous looking buildings, great for promotion. Inside, not so good. Not so good office spaces, terrible teaching spaces. Not that we have many teaching spaces. The new building, of course, changes that. It's very nice on the outside, perhaps not as classical or characteristic as the old law school, but the internal facilities are state-of-the-art, as I'll discuss. Just for information, the oldest building there was erected 1857. That's the one on the top left, the Law Quadrangle Building, as it's called. In fact, that used to be where all faculties of the university lived back in 1850. All 3 faculties were in that building. The others moved out over time and left us. We continued to grow and we had to move into these other buildings. The 3 buildings are located at various parts of the university, and there is no sense of community in the law school because of it, because we're scattered. It's very difficult to get people together. We only have 3 teaching spaces of our own at the moment. We have to teach most of our classes in other people's facilities, in commerce, in arts, wherever. When I joined the faculty at the end of '96, I was a bit dismayed to find the state of the networking was terrible in terms of the cabling. We had coax cabling, thin Ethernet. Most of the segments were over length. Most were bad connections. I suspect some were even rusting. The computing staff were spending an hour a day or more just fixing cabling problems within the buildings. We had to get new networking. So in fact, 3 years ago, the university agreed to fund the replacement networking in those buildings. So we're now 10 megabits switched, even though we knew we were going to move to a new building. We just couldn't continue as we were, and we couldn't expand in the last 3 years as we wanted to do without that. The 2 major buildings you see there are slap bang in the middle of the campus. They're at the heart of the campus. Very desirable space. The university made the offer to us of moving into a new building, slightly off campus. It's about 150 yards south of the main campus, not very far at all. It's in an area called University Square, which you'll see in a moment, and it's the major development focus of the University of Melbourne. That's University Square. The main campus is actually here. The building at the end of the park is the new law building, 12-storey high-rise. The building just in the middle is for the Departments of Information Systems, Software Engineering. The building here is mixed tenancy. One of the occupants in there will be Melbourne University Private, a full fee-paying university, if you like, mainly offering commercial courses to industry. That was taken about 2 months ago. You can see our building almost at the top. It is at the top now. All the base buildings completed. This was actually the largest building site in Melbourne for about a year. I should just say that the nature of our construction was perhaps different to most university developments. The offer made to us was part of this university development package. The buildings here were constructed under a development contract. What that means is there was a developer who took responsibility for building the buildings. That organisation, that group, brought in all the contractors. And in fact, it was the university that was the client for this project, not the law school. We were, if you like, a couple of steps away from perhaps where we would have liked to have been in terms of direct input into all of the designs. We had a lot of input, don't get me wrong, but we were perhaps a bit more removed than we would have liked to have been. The whole project was fast-tracked, which means planning, design, construction, fit-out, all happened simultaneously. We started planning mid-1999. We dug up the first bit of dirt February 2000. That's an artistic rendering of our new building. We move in December this year, so 6 months away. It's a high-rise. Everything above the so-called mezzanine level, including the mezzanine level, has fantastic views. It's a real highlight of the building. Just in general construction, we've put academic offices, all offices, around the perimeter of the building. In the core, we've put resource rooms and also open plan workspaces for things like research assistants. It's over 2,000 square metres, which I think is around about 300,000 square feet, if I'm doing my calculations right. The new building, we're putting some money into the foyer area, so there's a lot of stonework down there. You see the main staircase. Being a high-rise, we're very keen to promote the use of the stairwells as opposed to the 6 high-speed, high-capacity lifts which are in the building. We have a secondary staircase as well, and they basically move up through most of the building. So basically we consolidated from 3 separate buildings in 3 geographically separate locations into one brand new facility. We've gone from only 3 teaching spaces, each of which was about 15 years old when the AV went in, to over 27 major teaching spaces. We've got very good facilities now. We will do in 6 months. And the new building is forming a major part of our promotional exercises, fundraising exercises, and our curriculum. That's our Dean, standing in front of the building back in about mid-2000. That's the Dean, Michael Cromland. That's a very harassed General Manager, surrounded by paperwork for the new building, Penny Swain. I'll be mentioning it later on, but you cannot underestimate the amount of time that staff have to put in to manage and progress the projects. It's a major undertaking. Just to summarise this layout of the building, perhaps the most important thing is in the middle. We decided to put our library in the middle of the building on floors 3, 4 and 5. The Australian labelling system basically puts ground floor on the bottom, so in fact level 1 is up there. It's a 12-storey building. But we've got our library in the middle, this concept being that it's the heart of the law school. So we've got teaching facilities on the bottom, staff on top. That's basically the structure. On the very top level, we've got a boardroom and an alumni lounge. Academic floors, level 7, 8 and 9. Level 6 is actually our graduate teaching floor with our graduate diploma type students, master's students in graduate administration. Library, we don't call it a library, we call it a legal resource centre. At least we are at the moment. That might change by the time we move in. But that's to reflect the fact it's more than just books. It's more than the old conception of a library. We've got our moot court located in the library, or actually just beside it, and the 3 computer labs are inside the library. The bottom floors comprise undergraduate studies administration and teaching spaces and a reception. And also student lounges. We have a lot of space, open space for students. Some of our design principles, we were very impressed by the U-shaped seating of the Harvard Business School style. We wanted our students to be able to see each other, for the lecturer to be able to stand in the middle, to walk about. With our large theatres, we've adopted exactly this design, tiered, with fixed benches and ergonomic loose chairs. For our smaller seminar-style rooms, we've adopted flexibility. Flat floors, movable desks, not fixed. Standardisation is a big thing of not just AV, as I've mentioned there, but also things like furniture. We've really tried to make things consistent throughout the building. That helps with things like maintenance, moving equipment about. You can do it much more easily. Yes?
Do you have brand names in Australia like Sony and Panasonic?
Absolutely.
So as far as parts and technology?
Yes, we've got the name brands. Our projectors are Sony in the new building. Probably slightly newer models and the slightly brighter. The technology did improve over the last 18 months quite significantly. We expect to be able to have all the lights on in our theatres and the projector going without any problems. Part of the tendering process for the equipment involved maintenance periods with those name brand companies. getting the maintenance period and those contracts worked out is a very major part of any building project. Just the other design feature. In our classrooms, the lecturers find it vital to have access not just to one presentation medium, but basically they wanted at least two out of whiteboards, overhead projectors and computer video projection. Our standard AV suite.
Yeah, excuse me, while you make that comment, one of our faculty members is in a class like this, he wants to work with the whiteboard and the screen simultaneously. And in this particular classroom and others like this, with the screen coming down,
yes,
it would be impossible for him to have his internet feed going on the screen while
yes,
he does equations and things on the whiteboard.
Many of our staff feel exactly the same way.
Did you respond to that?
We did. We've done it with mobile whiteboards. Every lecture theatre has fixed whiteboards and mobile whiteboards. So that if in some theatres the screen drops down like this and it's obscured, or more to the point, we don't have drop-down screens. We always project onto white walls behind, or either beside the screen, or in fact the screen's hidden behind the movable whiteboards. We always project onto white walls. But we've got mobile whiteboards to cover that precise issue. And our staff refused not to have overhead projectors. We do have document cameras. Not in every theatre. We've got a small number that are movable, but our staff demanded overhead projectors. They weren't happy with the resolution of any of the document cameras, including the digital ones. They wanted to be able to just take a photocopy from a book which had 8-point text in the footnotes, and they wanted to be able to show it to the class. With overhead projectors, they can do it. And we've therefore got overhead projectors in every single classroom. We have Crestron control units, much like Deb showed earlier. Our latest models are web-enabled, so we can have an AV person sitting in the back row with his laptop plugged into a socket, mirroring the controls that the lecturer uses, so the lecturer doesn't need to worry about turning the lights up and down. The AV person can do that. I should just mention the podium. In our tiered theatres, much like this one, we've got a fixed podium, similar design to that. In our smaller so-called flexible teaching spaces, our seminar rooms, we've gone with a movable podium. We've got floor boxes everywhere in our flexible teaching spaces, and we've got a drawer with a laptop computer in, so that it's not too heavy. Otherwise, all of the teaching spaces have exactly the same equipment. We do have a number of smart boards which are mobile, can be wheeled into the different classrooms as required. We do have mobile digital document cameras. Some theatres are equipped for video conferencing. They've got them fixed, but otherwise we've got some mobile units. Well, we've got slide projectors just in case somebody wants to use a 35mm slide. It might happen. And we have around about 5 spaces with fairly full-fledged video conferencing. Similar setups to what we've got here. Our cameras are always manually controlled. None of them are automatic. Unlike this room, which is automatic.
No, actually, I think you're on manual control.
Oh, okay, right. Just one bit of background. Melbourne University Law School is not involved with distance education. We see the video conferencing as a way to bring in experts or to deliver some of our expertise from our lecturers into other universities. For conferences, seminars, but we don't actually get involved with distance education in our law school at the moment. I'll just quickly move through these. We have 13 flat floor flexible teaching spaces, 7 tiered theatres similar to this one. We have 2 particularly big tiered theatres on top of that. One's got a capacity of 176, the other one capacity of 400. The 400-seat one, in order to get the 400 in, the architects have put in some fixed seating at the back couple of rows. You basically sit down on the chair and there's a pull-down tablet. We didn't want the fold-up arm style, the ones which collapse all the time. We wanted the pull-down ones from front. It also means that if there's nobody sitting next to a student, they can pull down a second tablet and use that. But there's very little fixed seating. It's almost all flexible. Just a couple of quick pictures. That's one of our tiered theatres. This one's not particularly U-shaped at all. A possible floor plan for one of the flexible flat floor spaces on the left. Perhaps the only thing to note here, we have power and data all the way around the edge of the room. We also have floor boxes with power and data. And we have wireless networking, but I'll come to that later on. So 13 flat floor seminar rooms, 9 tiered spaces, 9 tiered theatres. Oops. We've also got a number of syndicate rooms for the students.
What's a syndicate?
It's a small meeting room. We have breakout groups in our classes.
It's not a mob.
Sorry?
It isn't for the mob, organized mob.
Well, probably not. We have 2 standard computer labs, one capacity of 60 people, the other one 20, inside our Legal Resource Centre. They're arranged in a herringbone fashion, so that it's not just all facing front, they're actually angled towards the front, staggered like that. Gives slightly more room to the students. Our middle-sized lab, around about 25, I think it might be 30 actually, we call it a Research Collaborative Learning Computer Lab. It's actually office desks, effectively, in pods of 4. For students all turn around, they can actually form a work group of 4 students, or they can turn around and work at their computer with plenty of desk space surrounding them in what effectively is a little work corral. The moot court it's actually roughly the size of the smaller moot courts here. Ours isn't as big as their big one. Our technology, though, is similar. We have 6 large plasma screens, much like the 2 that you've seen in their big moot court. Our judges, bar, juror benches, all of those have small LCD screens for computer for displaying evidence and other information. We have automated digitising of everything in the moot court, and also 4 smaller moot courts which are surrounding the main one, where we call them breakout rooms, but they're small moot courts. Everything gets digitised by the cameras, run back to a server, and is available via the web automatically. We have 4 video appraisal rooms which are just for playback purposes. All of these rooms form a suite, so the lecturer can have something happening in the major room, students can go to the breakout rooms, and then they can play it all back in any of those spaces, including the video appraisal rooms. Yes?
How many audiovisual technicians do you have?
At the moment, the law school at the moment possesses no audiovisual technicians. We only have 3 teaching spaces. Our computing staff double as AV technicians. The new building will have to change all of that, quite obviously. We are planning at the moment for 1 AV technician, and with backup support from Central University AV people.
How many IT people do you have for network?
We have 4 computing staff. We have a network administrator, and we now have 3 desktop support staff. We also have a web officer who's not actually part of the computing group. She is part of the promotions unit, development unit.
So you have a pretty transparent relationship with Central University, so you can draw from their staff?
For the AV, yes. We actually still need to finalise the planning and how that relationship is going to work. That will be the exercise for the next month or so, to work out how that's going to be staffed and resourced. At the moment, the planning that has happened to date would indicate a law school person as the AV technician.
Because, I mean, your reference to automatic recording and digitizing just plain doesn't happen. You have to have a body to babysit.
We hope, yes. I think you're right for any significant recording, but the system is automated. The lecturer goes in, types in a name of the session, and hits the record button on the touch screen. Everything is automatic. All cameras get digitised back to the server. It is automatically combined into a split screen, and when the students go to a web page, they can see the list of all the sessions, they can bring one up and hit play, they see all the cameras, and they can fast forward and rewind effectively through the digital media. We're hoping it is moderately straightforward, but I do expect to have an AV technician on board for any significant activities.
Do you have a website we can see?
Yep, sure.
I mean, just in your notes.
Yes, it's www.law, www.unimelb.edu.au. There is a website later on, I think I can bring it up. I'm not sure if the actual address is on there, but it's www.law.unimelb.edu.au for Australia. That's a couple of computer renderings of our library, Legal Resource Centre. It's on 3 levels. We have a major staircase running up through the middle of the library. We've got soundproofing materials or sound absorbing materials on the walls. We obviously don't want sound echoing throughout the library, and we don't want to repeat some of the mistakes such as what happened at University of Cambridge with their law library there, which famous design, lovely design, but that sound echoed fantastically everywhere throughout the building. There's a number of spaces within the library as well, discussion rooms. Postgraduates get small little offices, small as in about this big. They get their own little space. We have a special resource room with braille and special support facilities for disabled students. For networking, we've got over 6,000 connections within the building. Every seat, everywhere in the lounges, hallways, has power and data. Cat 6, we're using 100 megabit fully switched, gigabit backbone in the building. The university backbone is ATM, so we link up to that. We have put a fair amount of wireless, but not a huge amount, in the building. We accept it's a changing standard. It's not that expensive to put in base stations, so we've put it in the teaching theatres and the lounges and the library. Wireless networking. And we've gone to tender and we've come back with, thankfully, Cisco for all of that equipment. I've got documentation if anybody's interested in the technical aspects of it.
Question.
Yeah.
The wireless in all the classroom, is it wired as well in all the classrooms?
Yes. Yep. Wired absolutely everywhere. Wireless in many locations, but not in the academic floors, for instance. That's me getting very excited over the cabling. Hopefully it's going to be a bit neater by the time they've finished pulling it all through. We also have a broadband network coax cable for video distribution, much like they use here in Suffolk. Just for your interest, flexibility, standardisation. This is the office furniture. Starting in the top left corner, that's the standard office setup. We get the L-shaped workstation desk. We get a return on the back, which we can also put a bookshelf hutch on top of. We've got a coat cupboard, filing cabinets, drawers. The round knob on the end can be detached, and as you can see here, and it actually forms a separate meeting table, if you like. Desk is height adjustable, ergonomic chairs. Not the colour scheme we're going with, but we've standardised this throughout the entire building. In administrative, academic areas, even computer labs. Only thing I'll point out here is we haven't gone with adjustable keyboard things because we loathe and detest them. Ergonomically, you adjust the height of a chair. By having just a flat desk, you can put the computer anywhere, either on the bend, back on the side, or wherever you want. In terms of bookshelves, this
really work with a small person. I mean, if you really have a short person, you adjust the chair up too high. You need to have something to put their feet up.
Absolutely.
You drop it too.
Yep. The Australian design standards basically suggest that footrests be supplied for anybody with at certain height levels. So yes, we would expect to have adjustable chairs, desks, and footrests. Absolutely. You can just see some bookshelves here. There's, I'm actually not sure how, I think there's about 3 banks of bookshelves in most academic offices, and at least 2, probably 4 filing cabinets. Undoubtedly not enough. So I mentioned we've got academic offices around the perimeter of the building. We've gone with open, flexible space in the middle, and typically that's filled up with workstations that look like this for research assistants with partitioning in between. To give the research assistants privacy, we've built bookcases and filing cabinets around the outside of them. and those bookcases and filing cabinets are lockable, so that staff have overflow storage capacity. If it doesn't fit in their office, they can walk outside and they'll find more bookshelves and filing cabinets there surrounding the research assistants, basically forming a wall. In terms of some tips that I can convey, the first thing is you have to know what you're doing at the moment and you have to know where you want to go. You've got to work out your curriculum, how you want the technology to be used in it as best you can. Your vision is what should guide the design of the building, not the architects, not central universities, not the contractors, not the equipment that is being supplied. You've got to have a vision, you've got to retain control of the project, and as I'll mention later on, that's a lot of work. Your staff are going to be, at least a significant number of your staff will be involved very heavily with project planning and management.
Do you have a consortium of faculty who are interested in this progress?
Yes, given the fact that this building has been planned and built in under 2 years, we found that communication and consultation was very difficult to achieve. We didn't want to be putting up wrong information. That was almost more dangerous than giving out no information. We consulted with the key players when we had to. So when we had to design the teaching spaces, we got those people involved who were doing a lot of teaching, the senior academic staff members. We got Central University Audiovisual to assist us, contractors. We listened to everybody, and then we put in our requests to the architects. It wasn't quite a demand because we weren't the client, we were the end user. Yes?
I should just indicate I'm here at Suffolk University and I was chair of the building committee, and I can comment to anybody later if you're interested in some of our experience. But we had a faculty-led committee which involved other people, and I think it was certainly helpful to us to be able to have the people who were going to be using the space actually involved in the programmatic effort from the very beginning. But we did involve our AV and computer resource and the other administrative staff quite heavily as full participants in the process, rather than leaving them out.
We had a website where we tried to convey information to our broader academic staff. But ultimately, I guess there was just a small group of people that were the key drivers behind the design of this building. The dean, the general manager, people like myself, some of the senior academic staff and so forth. It wasn't quite as an inclusive process as we would have liked. That was because of the development-driven contract arrangements. Learn the jargon. As soon as you enter into any building issues, you'll be bombarded with terminology. So you've got to know the difference between 50 square feet and 100 square feet. You've got to know HVAC with heating, ventilation, air conditioning. You've got to know networking and audio-visual and sight lines and load and heat balances, and you've got to learn it because otherwise you'll be at a disadvantage compared to the contractors and the architects who will probably try and pull one over your eyes. Avoid trends. I think Suffolk's done a very good job with a very classical, timeless design. Our design, being a high-rise, is perhaps to some extent necessarily more modern. Hopefully the design will be nonetheless moderately neutral. It will age well, but I think it's important that on architectural grounds, on technology grounds, you probably don't want to be too adventurous. I think somebody mentioned being on the cutting edge but not the bleeding edge, and I fully concur with that comment. When you're designing a new building, it's a fantastic opportunity. Go for the stars. Go for the stars because you're going to be cut back. At some point, budgets will run low. There'll be delivery problems. It's much better to actually say you want this amount, knowing you only need this amount, because you can graciously cut back and be seen as a wonderful organisation, when in fact you knew you were going to be cut back to that point at some stage. I've already mentioned standardisation and flexibility. Try and standardise furniture, AV, networking. It means that if we run a conference in our law school and we need a lot of not ergonomic chairs but normal sled type chairs, we'll be able to pull them out of seminar rooms or academic offices, and no, they're going to all look the same and match up. In our library, we're going for ergonomic chairs everywhere, so that students don't have a choice. They've always got the one type of chair. They're not going to move a standard 4-leg chair into an inappropriate location. And that gives you flexibility as well. When you're designing the spaces in your building, you have to think relationships. Who needs to be close to the dean? Does finance, alumni, promotions need to be up on the same level as the dean? Where do the computer labs go? What's the relationship between the computing staff and media and the student labs and the teaching spaces? Where should all of these things fit together? We spent a lot of time in our initial planning stages drawing boxes and labelling them as sections within our faculty and working out what seemed to fit relationship-wise with other areas. Document everything. When you're dealing with contractors, when you go to the meetings, you will be asked, oh, but you made that decision 18 months ago on the 12th of April, and you'll have to justify certain positions that you've taken. I'm sure everybody does this, but the internet, other institutions have a lot of knowledge that you need to tap into. So visiting a Suffolk University and looking at what they've done is a very important strategy for working out what's good and what's bad. If you can do it, we struggled with this one. Try and retain control as much as possible. Try and retain the flexibility to put less money into loose furniture and more into AV, or vice versa, whatever your priorities are. Try and develop the relationships with the contractors, so that you retain control of the entire process. Don't let somebody else drive it. Plan early, purchase late. If you can do it, is definitely the way to go. You don't want to be purchasing projectors a year before completion of your building or networking equipment. It all changes so rapidly. And just a final point that I've mentioned before, we had half a dozen staff who were the key project leaders, if you like, and they've devoted many days each week to this project over the last 2 years. In my instance, as Director of Legal Educational Technology, technology's in there, so they assume that I know everything about air conditioning, heating, lighting, not just educational technology. So I've been roped into a lot of these planning activities. Many of your staff will be seconded for considerable parts of their time, and you have to plan to cover those absences and for those staff to be aware of what that will mean for their workloads. And I think that's everything that I've got. So I think in the last 10 minutes we'll take questions.
I have 2 questions. What is the total cost of this building, and how much is coming from the government and how much is from the private sector?
The University of Melbourne, like most universities in Australia, bar one, I think, is basically government funded. So we have to respond to government criteria and restrictions. So arguably all this is, there is certainly government funds involved. The University of Melbourne is quite entrepreneurial. I mentioned briefly at the start the Melbourne University Private offering commercial courses. But this whole University Square development is a response by the University of Melbourne to space constraints. So the law faculty has not, it's been offered to the law faculty, this building basically. So we didn't have to go through a major fundraising exercise. It was a one-off opportunity which we've grasped with both hands. In terms of actual project costs, data cabling, $1 million. Active equipment that plugs into the data cabling, the switches, $1 million. Audio visual, actually not too sure, quite a few $1 million. Base building, $30 million. Fit out, $30 million. Add it all up, I'm not quite sure what the total project cost is, to be honest, and that's partly because I'm several steps removed away from the actual project developer. But it doesn't come cheap. But hey, I'm talking Australian dollars, and they're worth nothing, so. Yeah.
Did you say the building was 30 or 13?
30.
30.
Yeah. It's a ballpark as well, plus or minus 50%. Well, probably plus 50%. Yes.
To what extent did you use consultants, we'll say, for sound, for spaces? Did you not use them?
We did. I don't know if I've got it here. It's worth showing just for the amusement value. I don't know if you can see this, but it's a very complex looking... That's the top level project management team and some of the top level consultants involved. It's a nightmare. Yes, we use consultants. And I actually suggest that when it comes to tendering processes, we may be the law school, we may be able to put the fine print in, but we're not experts on tendering. I think you've almost got to use contractors and consultants at some point. We used them basically for most areas. They were on offer to us from the project management team, so we did tap into them. The university has its own networking section and AV section, and also, I'll flash up some other documents. The university has strong guidelines on teaching space design and strong documents on wireless networking and the university style guide for signage and voice and data networks, and so that's quite helpful. But any new building will push any already documented standards. Our building pushed these. So this was useful. It was a starting point, but I think in all these areas we've progressed beyond the basic design criteria of the university. But their own the university staff were useful to tap into, the contractors were useful to tap into.
In the consultants, did you do most of the hiring level of the law school, or did the architect and you?
No to both of those. It was actually the developer.
I see.
So perhaps it was suboptimal from all perspectives. Yeah.
Peter, two questions. One is, do you have satellite uplinking and downlinking capability?
No, we don't. Satellite is not a big technology in Australia. It wasn't even a consideration.
The second question is, considering the ubiquitous nature of data and electricity in all of these various teaching spaces and library spaces, when do we reach a point where maybe computer labs, or will we reach a point that computer labs are no longer necessary? How do you make that decision?
It's a good question. I think at the moment we still have the need. For the next year or two, I think that will be the case. But I can see that lecture theatres are becoming the second computer lab. Students can come in, plug the laptops in, and the need to supply centrally allocated computers for students to come and use is diminishing. In Australia, with the government-run system of universities, we can't mandate that all students must have laptops. So perhaps we're further away from being able to scrap computer labs than some American universities. But for teaching purposes, it is very useful to have standardised equipment and software. So I think for teaching purposes, there's still a place for computer labs, perhaps going into the medium term at least. But I do see that if we can leave theatres open and they're fully wired or wireless, then the need for a computer lab just for students to type up assignments, to surf the web, to read email is not as great as it used to be. Yeah.
What other kind of accreditation requirements do you maybe have in Australia as far as the technology?
Accreditation requirements.
Are there?
There's what are called Australian standards, which cover a broad range of things, including lighting, electrical, cabling. So we certainly had to comply with Australian standards on the installation of our Cat6 network, as well as the Cat6 standards, such as they are. We had to comply with Australian lighting standards and disability access. I'm not sure if you noticed on the foyer computer rendering, but the floor had different colours, and in fact, there's different textures to meet the requirements of disabled access, so people know when they're about to approach a stairwell and things like that. AV, certainly the university guidelines were very helpful there. There's not as many Australian standards for that, or industry standards. But electrical, data, heating, networking, we were on pretty safe ground there.
Were you through the building process, were you personally on site? And if so, how often and what lessons did you learn?
Yes, I was on site, not as much as perhaps I would have liked to have been. Previously, I worked at the University of Tasmania, a different state of Australia, and we put an extension onto that building. I was probably on site for that extension a lot more than I've been for this one. And that's also part of the fact of this distance between us and the architect, the contractors and the consultants. If the law school had more direct input and actual control of the entire process, I probably would have been on site, several times a week. As it was, I was on site several times a month, if that. Yeah, I would recommend being on site as much as possible because contractors do the wrong thing. In our case, there was some project management expertise brought on board, and that project management team helped out a bit. But again, it was more layers between us and the final solution.
One thing we did, my memory's right, we actually, when we installed our carpeting, we cooked the building for a few days.
Okay.
Before we let anybody in.
Yeah, the sick building syndrome. All the new stuff starts outgassing, and yeah, the first perhaps week or two or month can be quite interesting when you move into a new building. We haven't quite finalised our plans on how we're going to handle that. I suspect it might be handled in a de facto way because all new buildings have a handover maintenance period. We don't anticipate entering into the maintenance period until all major items are actually fixed, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some outstanding issues. So perhaps we'll delay moving in just to make sure everything is spot on. But cooking the carpet's a nice idea. I'll see what we can do about that one.
Could you list how many faculty, how many students, maybe your FTE ratio is?
We have 2,500, 600 students and 75 full-time faculty staff, and at least the same number of adjuncts who come in from the professional various expertise that we bring in. What's the ratio? I'm not sure. But yeah, 2,500 students of postgrads and undergrads. We teach the LLB degree in Australia, much like the Canadian system, certainly the UK system. And in terms of staff, I guess we're a somewhat small law school. So our ratio probably isn't as good as we'd like it to be.
So would you say, would you characterize that there's a good relationship between Central University and yourself? I mean, as far as, needs and because going into a new building, I mean, it's the unanticipated kind of requirements.
Absolutely. Yes, I would characterise it as a good relationship. The University of Melbourne is fairly flexible. In the past, it was perhaps more centralised. I think there were some issues perhaps in the 1970s and 80s which drove the university to centralise a lot of things. I think the 90s saw that drift away a bit, and there is now more control by faculties of things like networking and so forth. In terms of a law school's relationship, we've actually tried to cultivate a good relationship with most parts of the university, with the central services. The new building is going to be a major shift for us, and we'd need to do, I guess, a bit of induction work with those central services. They, like us, perhaps haven't been over the building as much as they should have during the construction phase. So that will be an important part of the coming months' work.
Would you say that the Central University is newer or older or undergoing the same growing pains as the law school did?
The Central University supplies services throughout the entire campus to all faculties, and as such they deal with a broad range of technologies and equipment and resources. So they are used to dealing with very old facilities and with the latest technology. We're not the only new building going up. We saw there's 3 other buildings in University Square, 2 others apart from ours, and there's other new buildings that are being constructed at the moment on the University of Melbourne campus. So it may be very high density city campus, but there's still a lot of growth happening. Being such an old institution, the university bought up most of the land back in the 1800s. So although there's other buildings there, we basically own the land, and there is scope for a lot of growth at the University of Melbourne.
Is there a faculty of architecture at the University of Melbourne?
Yes, there is.
Then how did you go outside or consult an architect?
No, we do not consult with them at all. Just as an aside, the architecture faculty built their own building about 60 years, or no, probably about 50 years ago. And they did it by going to the industry and saying, can you loan us all the parts? And they built a fairly extraordinary building which has had to be patched up over... not that affected our decision not to go to architecture. This isn't being watched by anybody in Australia, is it? Okay, thank you.